My parents said my cousin was a safer bet. Their words. Not that they used those exact words, but that's what they meant. I had spent 6 months putting together an impeccable business plan, studying the market, and validating an innovative digital security idea for small businesses. I knew the execution would be difficult, but the opportunity was real. I just needed a push, an initial loan. Nothing more. I walked into the living room with my presentation printed out, color-coded spreadsheets in hand, and my heart pounding like crazy. My dad barely glanced at the papers. My mom didn't even put down her phone. "You want to start a company by yourself?" he asked, as if I had just told him I wanted to be a magician in Las Vegas. Yes, a digital security startup. Small at first, but with the potential to scale. I already have 2 clients in my sights. My dad let out one of those sighs heavy with disappointment. "Caleb, you're a good kid, but this," he held up the papers, "is a high risk. You've never managed anything. You've never led a team. This is real money. It's not a game. I'm not asking for a gift, Dad. It's a loan with interest. I'll pay it all back. You just don't have the profile," he said. "Not yet. Maybe in the future." My mom tried to soften the blow. "You're too technical, son. Very introspective. The business world demands presence, instinct, charisma. Look at Brandon." "Ah, yes, Brandon, my cousin, the star of the family. A commercial-worthy smile, an MBA in marketing. 1,000 followers on LinkedIn with posts about mindset. He wanted to open a premium experiences agency, whatever that meant. His plan included yachts, spiritual retreats, and, of course, influencers. I wanted to protect data for small businesses. Guess who got the investment? Brandon. And it wasn't a small amount. My parents, my aunts and uncles, and even my grandparents put money in. They said it was a project that looked like the future. What hurt the most was hearing my father tell my uncle, "Brandon has the soul of an entrepreneur. Caleb. I don't know. He's too cerebral. He lacks instinct." Instinct. That word hammered in my head for weeks. I locked myself in my room for 2 days. I was on the verge of deleting everything, but then I started to move. No plan, no money, just rage in my chest and a desire to prove them wrong. Because if I didn't have instinct, all I had left was execution. I started working in the early hours because during the day, I was still trapped in my mediocre job at a consulting firm that treated me like a glorified data entry clerk. I coded until my eyes burned. I traded hours of sleep for lines of code. My office was a cramped corner of my room with a creaky chair and a table with a wobbly leg, but it was mine. No one could say it wasn't. Meanwhile, Brandon was posting stories toasting with champagne, promising to revolutionize the concept of luxury for the new generation. My parents commented on everything with fire emojis and phrases like, "Proud is an understatement." I was just the son who was too technical to dream big, the one nobody believed could succeed. My parents were always good at building an image of a perfect family. You know the type of couple that goes to charity galas? They take smiling photos in front of a banner with a company logo and a motivational quote. That was the standard. They had money, connections, prestige in the neighborhood, and I was the quiet son, the one who never brought home a sports trophy, who didn't talk much at school meetings, but who always got good grades. That wasn't a source of pride, it was the bare minimum expected. Since I was a child, I felt there was an invisible hierarchy in the family. The natural leaders were celebrated, the good kids were ignored. My cousin Brandon was the first type, I was clearly the second. At 14, I was already dismantling old computers just to see how they worked. At 16, I programmed a simple security system to protect the school's files after a classmate accessed another's report card. I was called to the principal's office. I thought I was going to be punished, but the principal just looked at me and said, "You should be creating solutions for companies." Years later, that was exactly what I wanted to do, monitoring and containment software for data breaches for microbusinesses, people who can never afford the big solutions but live exposed to attacks. I saw real pain, a huge market, and I had the technical knowledge. What I lacked was the initial capital, and I naively thought my parents would understand that. I thought that because they knew me, they would see how serious it all was, but no. They looked at me as if I had gotten the idea from a conspiracy video. Meanwhile, Brandon was releasing videos where he talked about the power of the success vibration and the magnetism of abundance. My dad shared one in the family group with the caption, "This kid is going to go far." His project was a fiasco from the start. The so-called premium agency launched with a pretty website and zero structure. It promised retreats on yachts but didn't even have a license to operate. It promised exclusive experiences but used stock photos. It only took one influencer exposing him in a video for everything to come crashing down. Denied refunds, threats of lawsuits, mass deleted comments. And still, my parents said it was a learning phase. With me, there was never room for error. I continued developing the system, even without investment, using my old laptop that would freeze if I opened more than 3 tabs. I cut all possible expenses. I stopped going out, ordering food, I even sold my bicycle. My world became a cycle of waking up, working at the consulting firm, coming home, coding, sleeping late, and repeating. My face became dark circles and caffeine, and no one seemed to notice. Brandon, on the other hand, disappeared from social media for a while after the scandal and then, as if nothing had happened, came back with a new project, performance coaching. I swear, he did. He went from a luxury entrepreneur to a mindset mentor in 2 months. My parents were the first to repost with phrases like, "Reinvention is the secret of winners." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. 2 months later, I got my first real client, a small law firm that had suffered a ransomware attack. I used my system to recover part of their data, and with manual adjustments, I managed to prevent it from happening again. The payment was symbolic, but it was the first cent I earned from something I had created myself. I called my mother with a little bit of pride. She responded with a dry, "That's nice." Then she asked if I had heard Brandon's new podcast. "He's having so much success, he even talked about you. Can you believe it?" I said no and hung up. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at the mirror. I asked myself for the 1,000th time, what more did I have to do to be seen? Not adored, not praised, just seen. I started having anxiety attacks in secret. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, imagining what I would do if the system failed, if no one else signed on, if the money ran out before we took off. At the same time, I didn't want anyone to know, especially my parents. A part of me still believed that if they knew I was struggling, they would use it against me as proof that they had been right all along. I clung to every small victory. A recommendation, a positive comment, a client who renewed their contract. It was like swimming against the current with my arms tied, but every meter gained tasted of survival, and I did it all in silence. And still, nothing from my family. Slowly, I gathered enough money to get out of the cramped room. I rented a small office on the 2nd floor of a rundown commercial building. The walls had mold, the floor creaked, and the only air conditioner seemed to spit out hot air, but I was ecstatic. I brought my old table, a cheap router, hung up a cracked whiteboard, and wrote in large letters, "The solution starts here." I hired 2 freelancers to help with specific projects, Cassie, a university classmate who knew everything about systems architecture, and Nora, a designer I met on a tech forum who agreed to help me in exchange for future equity. None of us earned much, barely enough for breakfast, but there was an energy that my parents would never understand, the kind of energy you only feel when every conquered inch carries sweat, exhaustion, and persistence in its DNA. Our first serious contracts came from a network of dental clinics that wanted to protect patient data. The presentation we gave was simple, direct, with no fireworks, but we solved their problem, and they signed a 6-month contract on the spot. I remember leaving that meeting and sitting on the curb with a goofy smile on my face, trembling with adrenaline. I called my sister, Rachel, and just said, "We closed it." They trusted me. She screamed on the other end of the line. "I knew it. I always knew it, Caleb. You're a genius." She was the only one. She always was. Rachel was always on my side. Even when we were kids and I was the weird one and Brandon was the champion, she would let me watch movies with her. She defended me when they made fun of my worn-out clothes and said that one day the world would see me as she saw me. She had also been belittled by our parents, in a different way. She chose to be a literature professor instead of studying law like they wanted. My dad said she had wasted her talent, and my mom only spoke of her career as a hobby. That's probably why we understood each other without needing to say much. When I told her I had rented the small office, she showed up with a new coffee maker and a poster with the phrase, "Build in silence, conquer out loud." We stuck it to the wall with electrical tape. It became the company's mantra. Meanwhile, my parents continued to ignore me. They didn't ask anything, didn't call, didn't send messages. But they kept investing time, money, and pride in Brandon, who was now selling high-performance emotional online courses and collaborating with fitness influencers. And to top it all off, one day I saw a video of him using my story, literally my story. He said he had started from scratch with a system created in a tiny room, that no one believed in him, that he had to learn to lead, that he almost went bankrupt, and yet he pushed forward. My jaw dropped. He was describing my journey as if it were his own. He used phrases I myself had said in an interview months earlier, but with the intonation of a stage salesman. And my parents commented on the video, "You are an example of resilience. The whole family is inspired by you." I broke a glass when I read that. In the company's third year, we finally had a positive cash flow. We closed a contract with a rapidly growing fintech company that needed a robust system against fraud. It was the first time we received a sum that let us breathe. With that breathing room, we renovated the office, hired a full-time team, bought our own server, and that was when my parents reappeared. Update 1. It all started with a call out of the blue. My mom, with her usual sweet voice, said, "I saw your company was mentioned in a business magazine. How wonderful, son. We knew you'd make it far. We knew." As if they had been supporting me in silence the whole time, as if they hadn't deliberately ignored me, as if they hadn't mocked the idea when I asked for help. I replied with a dry, "Thanks," but the discomfort was only growing. The following month, I was invited to a roundtable on cybersecurity at the city's business event. It was a big event, full of local entrepreneurs, press, and politicians. I didn't know it, but my parents would be there too. I arrived at the hall and saw them at the back, talking to a group of investors. As I got closer, I heard my dad say, "Caleb always had talent." We encouraged him not to give up, even when everything seemed difficult. I just stood there, watching. My mom added, "It was a family effort. Every achievement of his carries a piece of what we built together." Built together. That was it. They were making it seem like they had helped, that they were behind it, that this company was the fruit of a family legacy. On the panel, I briefly mentioned my journey. I talked about the difficult start, the support of friends, the absence of external investment. I looked directly at them when I said, it all started with a no, but sometimes, no, is the push you need to do it your own way. My mom smiled as if the phrase was about how they had wisely molded me, as if it had all been part of the plan. After the event, the subtle moves began. A post on my dad's Facebook, proud of my son and our company, which was born with solid family principles. A photo of the front of the Bantaseal building with the caption, "A visit to our headquarters. This is growth." They were vague but calculated messages. And I knew how it worked. The more you repeat a story, the easier it is for it to become true. They weren't getting closer to celebrate, they were rewriting, repositioning, infiltrating my success. I talked to Rachel. "They're trying to take ownership of something that was never theirs." She replied, "And the worst part is, deep down, I think they believe it. They lie to themselves so much that they can no longer distinguish between truth and convenience." Cassie, my partner, was furious. He said it could even damage our reputation, that it looked like nepotism when it wasn't. Nothing was inherited. The company was born from the ground up, from emotional bankruptcy, from their contempt. I asked them to stop. I sent direct, polite messages. I told them those posts were confusing our partners. I asked them to leave the company out of it. My mother replied with a heart emoji. My father ignored me. The next month, I received an email from a journalist asking for an interview for a story on family businesses and generational succession. Guess who had given him my contact information? My father. I replied to the journalist with complete clarity, my company is not a family business. I did not receive investment from my family. I started alone, with my own effort and the support of friends. Any narrative different from that is not true. He thanked me, said he would adjust the focus, but the article came out anyway with the headline, From Father to Son, How Family Values Shaped a Successful Startup. My name on the cover, my face, and in quotation marks, phrases I never said. My head was boiling. I called the newsroom, demanded a correction. The reporter said my father had confirmed the details and that they understood he was a partner. Partner. I stared at the email for a few minutes, unable to react. Now my father was presenting himself as a partner in Bantaseal, without having put in a single cent, without having tightened a single screw, without having written a single line of code. He was occupying spaces that didn't belong to him, erasing me from my own story. I called Cassie and Nora for an urgent meeting. I explained everything. I showed them screenshots, emails, posts. Cassie slammed his fist on the table. This isn't just egocentrism, it's image theft. It affects the brand. We could lose clients who think we're some spoiled heirs company. Nora agreed. She said that if the narrative of a structured family business took hold, we would be devoured by the very values we always fought against, that only those born with everything can grow. My sister Rachel showed up at the office that night with 2 pizzas and a warning. Get ready. My parents are going to play dirty. They feel like they've lost control of the narrative, and they're going to try to get it back. She was right. The following weekend was my maternal grandmother's birthday. I hesitated to go, but my grandmother herself asked me to. She said she just wanted to see me. I went with the intention of not talking about work, just being there. But as soon as I walked in, I saw my father talking to a group of guests. And now that Bantaseal is expanding, we're thinking of taking it abroad. Caleb is already aligned with the directives, we just need to adjust the governance. I stared in silence, as if I'd been punched. He wasn't just positioning himself as part of the company, he was talking as if he were the CEO, as if my company were an extension of his legacy, as if it were a shared conquest. My mother approached me and, without even saying hello, said, "You should be more grateful. We're just trying to help you with your image. You seem ungrateful when you try to erase us from all this. The company is a reflection of us, too." I swallowed hard. What do you mean? Do you really think you have the right to say that? We raised you, my father interrupted, appearing behind her. Your entire work ethic, your discipline, that came from us. That's also an investment, whether you want to admit it or not. My head was throbbing, my veins pulsing. I needed to leave. But before turning around, I looked him in the eyes and said, "Don't confuse the trauma you caused with structure. You didn't shape me, you forced me to be alone. That's not to your credit." And I left, for the first time, not caring if they called me ungrateful. 2 days after that party, I received a notification on Instagram. My mother had tagged the company's official account in a post. I went to see the photo, a screenshot of our institutional page with the Bantaseal logo clearly visible. The caption, "Our greatest pride. Seeing our values flourish in the form of a company. Ethics and technology are the greatest gifts life could give us. We built this together with love, effort, and a vision for the future. We built this together." I couldn't contain my reaction. My hands were shaking. I knew she was provoking me, but what hit me wasn't the content, it was the coldness of distorting reality so publicly, knowing that no one outside our circle would ever know what really happened. That same day, a former colleague from the consulting firm where I used to work sent me a message. "Wow, congratulations. I didn't know your family had invested from the beginning. What a beautiful story, Caleb." I replied with a question mark emoji, and she sent me a link to an article republished by a business group. The same narrative, family startup, support from entrepreneurial parents, generational continuity. My name was there, and so were theirs. The lie was spreading. I sat in my office chair, staring at the floor. My head was spinning. It felt like I was losing something I had built so carefully. And the worst part was, I had no way to prove it, because they weren't blatantly lying, they were distorting, reshaping the story with half-truths, vague phrases, subtleties that sounded like compliments but were loaded with appropriation. Rachel came to see me that afternoon. She looked me in the eyes and said, "They want your story because theirs sank. Brandon turned out badly. The image of an entrepreneurial family is crumbling, and now they want to latch onto you to survive the fall. So what do I do? Let them? What am I supposed to do?" She was silent for a moment. "You can destroy all of it with a single speech. 1. But it has to be at the right moment. When everyone is watching." My mouth went dry. I knew exactly when that moment would be, and that made it even harder, because I never wanted to fight, I never wanted to expose anyone. I just wanted them to see the truth, to acknowledge it, or at the very least, to stay out of it. But they didn't know how to stay out of anything that shined, and now I was the thing that was shining. The moment Rachel mentioned was the annual event of the local business chamber, the same one where I was to receive an innovation award. The press would be there, investors, partners, everyone my parents wanted to impress. When the announcement was made public, my mother shared it with, "We are so proud of our achievement." The event director called me a few days before and said, "Your father mentioned he would like to say a few words on stage with you. Can we include that in the program?" I froze, took a deep breath, and replied calmly, "No, this achievement belongs to the team and the company, nothing more." She hesitated but agreed. I already knew. It would be there. The point of no return. The night of the event, I put on my best suit. Not because I wanted to impress, but because I knew what was about to happen. The hotel ballroom was packed. Bright lights, photographers, entrepreneurs shaking hands as if every handshake was worth a share of stock. I maintained a rehearsed smile, but inside, my breath was caught in my stomach. My parents arrived 15 minutes before the ceremony. She wore a blue dress that caught the eye from a distance. He wore that brown blazer he only used on occasions where he wanted to look respectable. They walked among the guests as if they were the hosts of the event. They greeted, smiled, and patted people on the back whom they barely knew. "Caleb," my mother exclaimed upon seeing me. She came toward me with open arms. "What pride, my love, you can't imagine how thrilled we are." She hugged me and posed for a photo next to the Bantasil sign. "Let's take one with your father, too," she suggested. "It's a family moment, isn't it?" My response came out firm. "Clar, this is not about you." Her smile wavered but quickly returned, as if nothing had happened. I went up on stage to receive the award. The presenter read a brief summary of the company's journey. He spoke of innovation, impact, and ethics in data use. When they handed me the trophy, they passed me the microphone. This was the moment. I held the award in one hand. I looked at the audience. My parents were sitting in the third row, center. Frozen smiles, confident gazes. They believed they would be mentioned, that I would thank them for everything, that their charade would be validated in front of everyone. And then I said, 3 years ago, this company started with a no that you never forget. A no that comes from those you most expect support from. A no said with conviction that says, you don't have the profile, you don't have the instinct, it's not worth the risk. I saw my mother's eyes blink rapidly. My father crossed his arms. I continued. But sometimes, no becomes your engine. When they push you out of your comfort zone without offering any safety net, you either fall or you fly. I chose to fly because even without structure, without investment, without applause, I knew the idea was good. And more than that, I knew I was good. Some in the audience nodded, others seemed to hold their breath. I'm not going to pretend this journey was pretty the whole time. I was scared, I was angry, I wanted to give up. But we built something based on truth. With sweat, with sleepless nights, with cold coffee and headphones to silence the world. None of this was inherited. Nothing came ready-made. And above all, no one, absolutely no one, has the right to take credit for what they didn't help build. The room fell silent. A dense silence, filled with meaning. So this award isn't just mine. It belongs to Cassie, to Nora, to Rachel, and to everyone who believed when there was no reason to believe. But above all, it's a reminder, not all legacies come from blood. Sometimes, they come from the decision to break from it. Applause. Some timid, others genuine. My parents were static. My mother's face was red, my father's teeth were clenched. When I came down from the stage, I didn't even look at them. I went straight to Rachel, who was waiting for me, standing, with tears in her eyes. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "That was it. That was exactly it." Behind her, I saw my father get up abruptly and walk towards me with firm steps and a tense jaw. He caught up with me in a side hallway, away from the ballroom. The first thing he did was point a finger in my face. "What was that, Caleb? Do you have any idea what you've just done?" I stood still. Not a word, I just looked at him, and that seemed to infuriate him even more. "You think it's nice to expose us like that? To humiliate your own family at a public event? After everything we did for you? What did you do for me?" I asked, my tone even. "Ignore me, ridicule me, deny me help, and then try to rewrite history when I started to succeed. You only got this far because of the education we gave you," he shouted. "Because of the values we instilled in you. That's also an investment, boy. And you just spit on it in front of everyone." My mother appeared shortly after, pale, her mascara running. "Caleb, you didn't have to do it like this," she said, almost crying. "You could have talked to us. You didn't have to put on a show." "You are the show," I replied. "You walked into my story after it was already written and tried to edit it as if you were the authors." By that point, Rachel was by my side. She crossed her arms, looking firmly at both of them. My father scoffed and turned away. "You're not going to get away with this," he said. "You're playing with reputations, with the family name, with our image." I laughed for the first time that night. "Exactly, Dad. Image. Because you never cared about the truth, only appearances." That night, I slept like I hadn't in months. For the first time in a long time, the story had been told as it really happened. But their reaction wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. 2 days later, the discreet, insidious attacks began. Passive-aggressive posts on social media, the kind about children who forget where they came from. A cousin wrote to me asking if it was true that I had used emotional blackmail to get help. Another said my parents were devastated by the public exposure and that all they did was try to support me in their own way. Soon, rumors began to circulate that I had gotten the initial capital thanks to a silent donation from my parents, that the Bantaseal office was an inherited space, that my mother had been a mentor in the early months. All lies. Cassie called me into the room. Nora came in right behind. "This is getting serious," she said. "There's a blog replicating these distorted versions. An influencer even mentioned us as a typical case of modern nepotism. If we don't act, this is going to really hurt us." I knew it. I knew it even before I finished my speech. That's when I made the decision. Update 2. We're going to sue for defamation, for unauthorized use of the company's image, and for appropriation of professional narrative. I want everything documented. Cassie and Nora nodded. Rachel was the first to say, "Are you ready for this?" "Yes, because now it's not just about me. It's about everything we built together, and nobody is going to steal that from us." We filed the lawsuit the following week. It wasn't just a symbolic process. We had evidence, screenshots of posts, audio from calls, emails with false information sent to the media. The lawyers said it was a solid case but warned us they would fight back. And they did. My parents hired a law firm known for being aggressive. In their first official statement, they alleged that everything said was an emotional interpretation of family reality and that the lawsuit was an attempt to silence concerned parents. The media loved it. There were columns that called the case a generational crisis in the business world. Some painted me as ungrateful, others as a victim, but everyone was talking about the story, and now no one controlled the narrative anymore. What began as a defamation lawsuit turned into a slow-motion legal spectacle. My parents filed a countersuit, alleging that I was trying to erase their immaterial contribution to my upbringing. They said that although they didn't provide financial support, they had provided the ethical, disciplinary, and emotional foundations that enabled my success. My lawyer laughed when he read it. Basically, they want royalties for being your parents, he said. I've never seen such a desperate argument. But I didn't laugh, because I knew their egos, and I knew they weren't doing it just to win. They wanted to wear me down, demoralize me, force me to back down. Meanwhile, messages started coming in from distant relatives, former schoolmates, even childhood neighbors, telling me they were disappointed that I would take my parents to court. One wrote, "If it weren't for them, you wouldn't have even been born. The least you owe them is gratitude." It was as if all logic had been swallowed by a fog of sentimentality. Nobody wanted to know the facts, only the most digestible story. And the most digestible story was that of the family hurt by the rebellious son. Still, we pushed forward. Over the following months, I was called to hearings, gave formal depositions, and had to relive every detail, from the day I first asked for help to the fake posts. My parents, for their part, presented themselves as victims. They cried. They said they were being excluded from their own bloodline, that their son's success had become a source of suffering. A fragment of my mother's testimony read, "We never thought that raising our son with principles would turn against us. He turned his back on us as soon as he became famous." Famous. The way she said it made me sick. As if it had all been for vanity, as if I were just another spoiled kid who got some attention and started biting the hand that fed him. My father went further. He said he was emotionally affected, that the process was harming his health, and that my attitude was toxic in public. He even demanded a symbolic correction as part of a settlement. He wanted me to publicly acknowledge that my career would not have been possible without the family values I received. I refused. In the next hearing, I presented evidence that he had signed documents offering himself as a partner in the company at meetings I never authorized. We had screenshots, we had emails, we had witnesses. It was at that moment that I understood. They didn't just want to appropriate my success, they wanted to buy a story they didn't build. And in the end, the justice system saw it. The judge was direct. The evidence presented demonstrated a deliberate attempt at image appropriation, defamation, and damage to the company's reputation. My parents were ordered to issue a formal retraction, remove all misleading published content, and pay damages for moral and commercial harm. The ruling used these exact words, fictitious reconstruction of a corporate narrative for the purpose of self-aggrandizement. The decision made news. Small local portals and columnists commented on the case with astonishment. Many who had previously taken their side deleted their tweets. But the damage was already done. Some investors we were negotiating with pulled out, not out of distrust, but for fear of getting involved in public drama. Cassie was furious. Nora had a breakdown. And me. I just felt empty. There was no victory, only exhaustion. A cold relief that filled nothing. Months after the process ended, I sat alone on the balcony of the new office, looking at the city I had crossed entirely by subway years ago, carrying an old laptop and a dream no one wanted to hear. My parents never apologized, never tried to make amends. The last I heard of them, they had sold part of the family business to cover their legal fees. I, on the other hand, moved on. Bantaseal grew. We hired more people. Rachel became our director of culture. Cassie and Nora are partners. And I finally understood that sometimes, breaking away is the greatest act of self-love there is. They wanted to steal my story, so I wrote my own. Thank you very much for having come this far.